Joined by the president of Concacaf, Victor Montagliani, here in Qatar. Vic, I know you've been to a lot of games. This has been the biggest moment for Concacaf over the last 4-year window. What can you learn from this World Cup?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One is, not only Concacaf president, but also with 26 on the horizon. Obviously, taking a lot of notes in terms of the operational side. I know we have a different footprint, we have some different realities, but there's a lot of things that are going to be similar in terms of stuff that people don't necessarily see, and some things they've done very, very well that we can adopt, and other things that are going to have to change just because of our market. And then there's the footballing side, right? Obviously, and it's been great. It's been great football. The thing that I love is, just when you're at the stadium or even walking about the city, just the crowds that are mingling. Different races, different religions, people hugging, people having a drink actually, in some of the areas that you're allowed. So it's amazing to me what football does. And notwithstanding, always people are trying to put the boots to our sport, but the sport I find always finds a way to rise above everything, and I've seen it here in Qatar.
Let's get into the CONCACAF teams. Obviously, no knockout wins again here, but getting a knockout wins is tough. I think CONCACAF teams in the history of this competition have only ever had 4, and it's been around 92 years. That's the challenge that you've got here. Overall, I know you've seen all your teams up close for every game. What's your overall impression on how Canada, Costa Rica, the US, and Mexico have done here?
Yeah, I think our stat is probably similar to the other 4 non-European and South American confederations, because that's how tough it is at this level. And it won't get any easier even with 48 if people think that it is. It's just the reality of how difficult it is. Our teams, listen, I would say for the majority of them, especially Canada and US, it's always been about 26 and building. And you saw that with the young teams and the experience they gained. Some of it, some very tough medicine that was taken in terms of the maturity that's needed at this level, both on and off the field. And I hope those lessons were learned by our teams. I think Mexico, I thought, especially in the third game, it's the best Mexico I've seen in probably 2 years. And so hopefully that bodes well for them moving forward to 26, bringing in some young players. And Costa Rica is Costa Rica. You just never, to think after their first game, the result they got, and then come back and be 15 minutes away from going into the round of 16. But that's Costa Rica. They battle. And obviously they're going to have to refresh their team as well. But as you can see, even the teams that didn't come here, they're knocking on the door. So it's going to be a very interesting next 3.5 years in CONCACAF in terms of the competitions.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. But what Costa Rica, Mexico, and the US have is past experience here. They all have that in common. Canada does not. You mentioned lessons learned on and off the pitch. Yeah. What does that mean in terms of what you think Canada will get out of this visit to Qatar, not just in the 3 matches that they played?
I think, it's like anything. When you first get there, you just, or the great quote by Mike Tyson, right? Everybody has a plan until they get smashed in the face. And Canada got smashed in the face in the sense of played really well against Belgium, started off well against Croatia, and then the quality of players, especially against Croatia, came to the forefront. And then even Morocco, I thought, especially in the second half, we applied ourselves. But I think, just from an association standpoint, they just, they didn't know what they don't know, and now they know. And so I think that bodes well. And it's also, if you look at the teams that do well at the World Cup, it's not just about the World Cup in isolation. Those players have consistently gone to big games in major tournaments. In our case, it would be Gold Cup, Final Four, Nations League. If in the European setting, it's Nations League Final Four, it's Euro semis. The nations that consistently do well, not just at the World Cup, but in between the World Cup, do well. And I think that's an important lesson here for our countries, is that regardless of what you think or might not think, you need to do well in your continental competitions, because that then provides that big game experience to your players when they got to go one more notch above, which is the World Cup.
For Canada, and just, I know that you've got all the babies of the CONCACAF team and you look at them all similar, but here in Canada, what needs to happen now for the infrastructure to get ready for the culture of hosting in 2026? Because we're not that far away, Vic. If people think 4 years, it's actually 3.5 years, and before we know it, we're into 2023 already. In terms of training facilities, preparation, everything to get ready to host a world like Qatar have done here.
Yeah, I mean, we've already started that in earnest in 2022, just in the background with our host cities, getting ready, our different levels of government. But I think once the calendar turns to 2023, all that pressure and heat's going to heat up. And we, I think, need to ramp up the preparations. And I think the cities have realized that. There's a observer program here. They're all here. I also think we need to now engage levels of government. Always a little bit more difficult. It doesn't matter what government, what country. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some countries, they're the ones knocking on your door because they're footballing nations, but pure and pure. But I think, we've had some very good discussions with everybody, all the stakeholders. And I think it's just ensuring that all the timelines are met. And I'm pretty confident that we'll have a great World Cup.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. That's off the field. Let's talk about on the field a little bit to get into the competition level. Now, obviously, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, there's a lot of discussion right now about how to find more competitive games. There's discussion, potentially rumors about getting into the Copa America in 2024. How do these teams now find more competitive games, knowing that they're already going to be hosting as hosts for 2026?
Yeah, there is a lot of speculation around, tournaments of that nature. And all I have to say is that, it is speculation. We are always discussing these matters with all the confederations. But what's important, I think, there's a bit of a misinformation in terms of some of these tournaments, and it's really not the jurisdiction of a federation or a league to have those discussions. Those discussions are held by the confederations. It's between confederations. My Gold Cup is mine. Nobody talks to the Gold Cup other than me. Copa America belongs to CONMEBOL and my partner Alejandro Dominguez. That's where the discussion happens. So I think there's a lot of misinformation of who can talk to who, and the reality is when I talk to Europe, I talk to UEFA. I don't talk to the Spanish Federation or French Federation. I talk to UEFA. And that's where those discussions are had. We will have those discussions. We've had them. We will continue with all of them to see how we can better our own competitions, maybe create new ones. I think I think we will probably have some sort of announcements on any of that stuff probably early in the 2023 stage, because we understand how important it is to have these competitions. We're also discussing with FIFA about a test event, similar to what they had here with the Arab Cup. So those are all things that are going to help not just our host nations, of course, but also help all our nations in Concacaf.
And as you would say, being a football guy, you just know the value of playing competitive games now between now and the next World Cup.
Yeah, and it's a balance. I think I've had this discussion with some of our federations. It's not only creating competitions, and that was our premise at CONCACAF when we were creating the nations, having more competition at your national team level, but it's also trying to put your players in environments where they're tested week to week. And I think that's actually as valuable, maybe even more valuable than even having X amount of national team games, is trying to get your players in those proper environments, which, Canada has done. The national team has grown, not because we played X amount of games, that's helped, but it's because we have players playing at Bayern Munich and Lille and Club Brugge and wherever our players are playing.
And also on the lower levels of that, the development of the Canadian Premier League, knowing how imperative that's going to be for the future of this nation. I think about what Japan have done here. Japan with the A-League, 1993 launched, get to the first World Cup 5 years later, then host 4 years later after that. MLS obviously came out of hosting the World Cup. This is obviously a few years behind those countries, but for Canada, how vital that is for the development pathway of those players is crucial. Yeah,
listen, I think it's early days. It's only been 4 years, but you can really see the benefit of it. I heard some ridiculous comments about there's no pathway. Well, maybe open your eyes. There is a pathway. Not one player on our national team hasn't followed a pathway, whether it's an MLS academy to an MLS team to a Bundesliga team, whether it's League One to MLS to Europe. They've all had a pathway. Unlike in the past, when the biggest club we used to have on our national team was Unattached FC. Now they've all had a pathway. And so I think people need to be educated when they start making these opinions and see what actually has gone on. And that's to the credit of people like John, who have worked in the grassroots, people like Jason, and people that were before him as well, like a Tony Fonseca, and those kind of people who have actually worked in creating this pathway, and to the MLS clubs and now the CPL clubs. Joel Waterman's a perfect example. who's now on the national team. Ismail Kone, look where he started in 18 months. Now he's at Watford. And so I think there is a pathway. We need to support it and get educated about it and get behind it.
What about the World Cup format, Vic? There's been a lot of discussion here, quite rightly so, about how wonderful this World Cup's been. 2 games going on at the same time, the drama of it, the fact that we've got 4 teams in a group, it feels right. 48 obviously is not going away. The idea that people have put out there of having 3 teams in a group, you may not be able to say it. I say it. I don't like it. It doesn't work. What do you know? Arsene Wenger spoke this week about FIFA maybe having the ability to change it. Where are we at with that? What can you tell us?
Yeah, my good friend Arsene. He loves talking about football, I'll tell you that. Good man. Listen, I think, first of all, any format, any competition, the host has a right to change it. Okay. Concacaf, we have the right to change our Gold Cup formats, our Nation League formats. FIFA is the same. So they have a right to change their format. I think there's been enough discussion to know that there needs to be a look at, even amongst my peers, about how this looks like, how it still fits into the calendar. You know, we can't have a 2-month World Cup, obviously. Right. It needs to be within that sort of 35-day window or whatever it is. And so I think there's some options there. And I think that's a review that we'll have in earnest once we finish this World Cup. And I think all that information, all those concerns needs to be put on the table and see if there is a better format, then it behooves us to do it, not only in the spirit of the competition, but for the sport.
That's positive. Last one for you, Vic, is CONCACAF. The attention turns towards you guys. As soon as that final whistle goes on the 18th in the World Cup final, it is your World Cup. How special is that, and what an opportunity is it to make it obviously the best World Cup ever?
Yeah, I mean, you just answered the questions. I got some shivers there. Just I don't know if the shivers are. Wow, we better start going here. But it's more, I think, the excitement of it. I'll be honest, as a Canadian, to think that this moment was fantastic. The first game, listening to our national anthem being played, watching our first goal, those are special moments. But also, I think now, I'm already envisioning the first game in 26 in Canada, where Canada's playing, and that national anthem at home, and that crowd that'd be full of red. That's going to be a special moment. Now, there's a lot of work to do between that moment and today, but and I know we'll get it done. But I think the emotions of it will be. They start now, and I think they'll be just through the roof by the time we get to 2026.
Special times, no doubt. A massive occasion here in Qatar for all the CONCACAF teams, in particular for Canada. Vic, can't thank you enough for this. Appreciate you.